Well, it's finally time for us to talk about the Nintendo Wii U and see how this specific console is holding up many years later since its initial release. Now, funny enough, this console did kind of come out in 2012. It bled into 2013 in some areas. So this device is about 10 to 11 years old as of this point, which is honestly pretty insane. And funny enough, the Nintendo Switch, which was kind of the direct successor to this console, is starting to get rumors and it's starting to get old. So we could be getting the next Nintendo Switch coming out, probably in the next 2 to 3 years, or maybe at least some announcement in 2 years. And what's funny is that there's a lot of people stating that if, Nintendo doesn't do things right, they could have another Nintendo Wii U on their hands. And what's crazy is the Wii U, this specific console that we're talking about, has kind of become synonymous with, kind of like a flop, as like a weird console. It's almost like a Nintendo GameCube, but this thing sold even less than a GameCube. So for those of you who don't know, the Nintendo Wii U, which came out in 2012, was Nintendo's main flagship console. This was the console that was kind of overtaking the Nintendo Wii. I think Nintendo had a plan to keep the Nintendo Wii for a little bit of time too, I'm not too sure, but this was their next main generation console. This, console was the Nintendo Wii U. It was supposed to be this hybrid console. It wasn't supposed to be a handheld. It was supposed to be an at-home console. Nintendo was still selling their DSi's and their Nintendo 3DS's, so they didn't want to go ahead and have some type of handheld console at that moment to compete with those ones, since the DSi's, the 3DS's were selling fairly decently well. The 3DS ended up selling very well later on in its lifespan. But with the Nintendo Wii U, this thing was an at-home console. It had a game pad, so, it was a very interesting thing. It had a 6.2-inch touchscreen on that specific gamepad, and this was a very interesting approach from Nintendo. I think since then we've all known basically how this console kind of ended up. But when people state, oh, the marketing wasn't that great on this console, they kept calling it the Wii, or they thought it was like an accessory to the Nintendo Wii, that's why nobody bought it. I was one of those people that thought so. I didn't even know the Nintendo Wii U had its own console, like a separate console that you plugged into the TV, until 2017, or I think in late 2018 I found that out. So even though I'm kind of in the tech space and I played a lot of Nintendo games, I didn't really even know about that. Mostly because probably not a lot of people bought the Nintendo Wii U as we know now. There wasn't really too many reviews and all this other stuff, and it seemed like people were way more focused on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 during that time, because they were also kind of, they were released around the same time as well. Now, we know Nintendo has that blue ocean strategy, so they don't try to go ahead and basically directly compete anymore with other consoles. They just kind of stay in their own lane, and they try to make a lot of sales like that. And we've seen this time and time again. I mean, in my opinion, if you take a look at, this current generation, I know so many people who have a PlayStation 5 and or an Xbox, Series X or S, and they also own a Nintendo Switch. Very few people that I know own a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series X or S, but they own a PlayStation 5 and a Nintendo Switch, or an Xbox and a Nintendo Switch. And I've seen this so many times over and over again. So there's a lot of overlap between a PlayStation and an Xbox. There's not as much overlap between a Nintendo Switch and an Xbox, or a Nintendo Switch and a PlayStation 5. And during this time with the Nintendo Wii U, Nintendo was trying to directly compete, I would say again, against the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4s. They were again focusing on the power side of things, which we saw with the GameCube didn't really last that, didn't really do that well on that console. But also, they were kind of focusing on this new, HD resolution, the full HD resolution that they were able to output to. So they were able to output to 1080p, which was also a humongous upgrade coming from the Nintendo Wii, which I think was like 480p or something like that. It was not that good a resolution on the Nintendo Wii. During that time, it may have been okay. But the craziest thing was that when you look at something like the Nintendo Wii, that console looked more iconic in a way, in my opinion, than the Nintendo Wii U. I think Nintendo really was trying to focus in on making this thing kind of live off the Nintendo Wii in a way. So then people would be like, you know what, I love the Nintendo Wii, let's keep that same moniker and let's just call it the Wii U, and then we'll just go ahead and buy it. It just didn't really work like that. It seemed like at that moment people really didn't want another Wii. It seemed like they were kind of done with it, and it looked like Nintendo couldn't really market the Wii U that well, and that's why the Nintendo Wii U ended up kind of flopping. Now, the one thing I loved about the Wii U, one, it was more powerful. There was a lot more power going on for something like the Wii U. So a lot of those games that were able to be upscaled, or, you're playing at 1080p and rightfully so. Well, all of those games that came out for this console, like Super Mario 3D World, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U, the game looked very good at that time. And there were tons of other games that came out, but you also had that huge library of already pre-existing Nintendo Wii games. I mean, there were so many Wii games you could play. Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Super Mario Galaxy 1, Super Mario Galaxy 2. There were tons of games available on that older console too. And who could forget Mario Kart 8 and New Super Mario Bros. U? Those are some of my favorite games to ever play. I haven't even played them until recently, like in the last year. I finished all those games, not Mario Kart 8, but all those other games. And that's what's super crazy. Those games have held up so well, from the Nintendo Wii to the Nintendo Wii U. Those games have held up well, way better than the consoles. Like, the consoles come and go, some are kind of ahead of their time. I would consider the Nintendo 64 and the Nintendo GameCube as kind of ahead of their time. The Nintendo Wii I would also throw in there as well. And the Wii U was one that I look at, and I don't really know if this console was ahead of its time, because the Nintendo Switch is exactly what Nintendo should have been able to do during this time. I understand they couldn't have done it because the 3DS was still there. They didn't want to take up handheld, sales. But as time and time progresses, and as we get later and later and later in the Nintendo Switch's lifespan, we start to see how Nintendo could have ended up doing a way better job here, but the learning lessons they've had and how this is going to affect Nintendo's consoles in the future, but also what Nintendo's going to be doing in the future. So if we take a look at the Nintendo Wii U right now, how it holds up, well, there's no more games being sold for this thing. A massive thing that just came out is that the Nintendo eShop is going to be discontinued. So we have probably like another month of the Nintendo eShop being available on this console before it gets shut down. So that's another very sad thing going on. So the Nintendo Wii U is probably going to end up, being discontinued fully very soon. You're still going to have the, gaming library you can go ahead and, get. The used prices of this thing have gone up quite a bit as well. And also on top of that, the gaming library of this thing with the CDs, like the physical discs, is probably only going to go up because you can only buy them brand new or in the used market. You won't be able to buy digital games on this console anymore. So I do feel like there's going to be probably a big, increase in the price in that area. But when I look at this console, it was basically a humongous learning lesson from Nintendo. I think they noticed like, hey, we need to market ourselves a little bit better. We can't have this like weird hybrid approach. We need to either make a console where we can both not only have it in handheld mode and go places, but also tap into that, at home, plug into the TV type of, market as well. And I think the Nintendo Switch did an amazing job. It was exactly what Nintendo should have done. And with something like the Wii U, it didn't sell that well at all. It was, I think, the lowest selling Nintendo console probably at that time. But it was a really interesting concept, and I do think the concept of this console has held up better than the actual console itself. Because without this console, we would have probably never had the Nintendo Switch, and then going forward, we would have never had those, millions and millions and millions of units of the Nintendo Switch being sold, and the lifespan of that Switch has actually held up a lot longer than a lot of people thought. So with this next Nintendo Switch Nintendo's making, I'm pretty sure what they're going to do is they're going to learn from the Wii U. They're going to be like, hey, we can't just call it the Nintendo Switch U or the Nintendo Switch 2. We're going to have to call it something else. We're going to have to tap into a different market. Even if that means they're going to have to wait out from making the next Nintendo Switch, I'm pretty sure that's what pretty much Nintendo's going to be doing. The Wii came out in 2006, the Wii U came out in 2012, and I think the Nintendo Switch came out in 2017. So it's already been about, like 6 years since that console's been out. So we could be getting an announcement very soon of when the next Nintendo Switch is going to be coming out. So in terms of that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.